The stairs creaked like brittle bones under my weight as I hauled the last box up to the 5th floor. The air was thick with mildew and something else, something sour that caught in my throat and made my stomach clench. Apartment 4B sat at the end of a narrow hallway, its door painted an ugly shade of green that was peeling around the edges like diseased skin. Water stains mapped continents across the ceiling above, their brown edges suggesting years of neglect. I fished the keys from my pocket, my hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and something deeper, a gnawing anxiety that had been my constant companion for months. This place was a steal at $400 a month, but standing there in that dim corridor, I was starting to understand why. The fluorescent light above buzzed erratically, casting jittery shadows on the cracked walls. It flickered in a strange, almost rhythmic pattern, 3 quick pulses, then darkness, then 3 more, like Morse code I couldn't decipher. The lock stuck, fighting me for a moment before giving way with a grinding click that echoed down the empty hallway. The door swung open with a low moan, revealing my new home, a cramped studio with yellowed walls and carpet that had seen better decades. The previous tenant had left faint outlines on the floor where furniture once stood, darker patches that reminded me of crime scene chalk marks. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was all I could afford with my mountain of student debt threatening to crush me. I set the box down beside the others and surveyed the space that would be my prison and salvation. A kitchenette huddled in one corner, its cabinet doors hanging slightly askew like broken wings. The laminate countertop was bubbled and peeling in spots, revealing the particle board beneath. The sink dripped steadily, each metallic plink seeming to grow louder in the oppressive silence. The single window overlooked an alley where garbage cans clustered like metal mushrooms, their lids askew, spilling refuse onto the cracked asphalt below. The bathroom door was ajar, revealing cracked tiles that had once been white but now bore the yellow-brown stains of age and neglect. A mirror hung above the sink, its surface reflecting the room with unsettling clarity, as if it were watching rather than simply showing. Something about that reflection bothered me. Not what it showed, but how it showed it, with a slight distortion that made everything appear subtly wrong. Moving in? I spun around, nearly knocking over the box at my feet. A woman stood in my doorway, and immediately every instinct I possessed screamed danger. She was pale, not just fair-skinned, but pale in a way that suggested something vital was missing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun that seemed to stretch her skin unnaturally, making her features appear sharper than they should have been. But it was her smile that made my skin crawl. It stretched too far, lips taut like wet canvas stretched over a frame too large for it. "I'm Clara," she said, her voice oddly melodic, like she was reciting lines from a play she'd performed 1,000 times. Each syllable came out precisely measured, almost rehearsed, with an underlying quality that reminded me of a recording played through old speakers. "I live down the hall. You'll like it here, Elliot." I had never told her my name. The lease paperwork, maybe? But even as I tried to rationalize it, her unblinking stare made my stomach clench with primal fear. Her eyes were gray, almost colorless, like old glass, and they didn't seem to move when she blinked, an unsettling, mechanical movement that reminded me of a doll's eyes. "Thanks," I managed, forcing a smile that felt like plastic on my face. "I'm sure I will." She tilted her head at an unnatural angle, like a bird studying prey before striking. The movement was too sharp, too sudden, accompanied by a faint crackling sound that might have been her neck or might have been something else entirely. "The building has its own rhythm. You'll learn." Her smile never wavered, never faltered, fixed in place like a mask. "Welcome home." She glided away with steps that made no sound on the creaking floorboards, leaving me standing there with goosebumps crawling up my arms like insects. Her footsteps, or lack thereof, bothered me almost as much as everything else about her. The building's floors groaned under my weight, protested every movement, yet she moved like she weighed nothing at all. I shook it off and returned to my boxes, telling myself that old buildings attracted odd tenants. Probably just a lonely neighbor trying to be friendly, albeit in the most unsettling way possible. Still, something about the way she'd said my name lingered in my mind like an echo I couldn't quite shake. 20 minutes later, there was a knock that made me jump. The delivery guy from the moving company stood in the hallway, holding the last of my boxes. He was young, maybe my age, but his face was pale, and his eyes kept darting down the hall like he expected something to lunge at him from the shadows. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the building's chill, and his hands shook slightly as he held the boxes. "Last of your stuff," he said, shoving the boxes at me with more force than necessary. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nervousness. He glanced past my shoulder into the apartment, then back down the corridor, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. "Man, this place gives me the creeps. Bad vibes, you know? Like, seriously, bad vibes." I followed his gaze and felt my blood chill. Clara stood at the far end of the hall, motionless as a statue, watching us. Even from that distance, I could see that unsettling smile splitting her pale face. She didn't wave or acknowledge us in any way, just stared with that mechanical stillness, her head tilted at that same unnatural angle. "She's just a neighbor," I said, though my voice sounded less certain than I intended. A nervous laugh escaped me, falling flat in the stale air. "Yeah, well..." He shook his head, already backing toward the stairs with obvious relief. "Good luck with that, man. Seriously, you're gonna need it." He practically ran down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, his footsteps echoing like gunshots in the narrow stairwell. I pulled the boxes inside and closed the door, turning the deadbolt with more force than necessary. The sound of the lock engaging was reassuring, solid and real, in a way that made me feel slightly safer. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive, like the building itself was holding its breath. I told myself it was just the weight of old concrete and neglect, just a strange neighbor and a skittish delivery guy. Nothing to worry about. But as I unpacked my clothes, small things began to bother me. The hallway light continued its bizarre pattern. 3 quick pulses, then darkness, then 3 more. The rhythm was so precise it couldn't be random electrical issues. When I paused to listen, a whisper seemed to drift from the heating vent, soft and unintelligible, curling through the air like smoke. I pressed my ear against the metal grate, but heard only the building's distant groans and the sound of my own rapid heartbeat. Then my keys slipped from their hook on the wall, hitting the floor with a metallic clatter that made me jump out of my skin. I hadn't touched them. I was across the room, unpacking books. The hook was secure, screwed firmly into the drywall with no sign of loosening. I hung them again, testing the hook's stability with increasing agitation. It didn't budge, solid as a rock, yet the incident left me deeply uneasy. I was stressed, that was all. Anyone would be jumpy in my situation. The new job at the design firm downtown was my last shot at a decent salary, my only chance to dig myself out of the financial hole I'd been trapped in since graduation. 3 years of freelancing had barely kept me afloat, scraping by on logo designs and website mock-ups that paid pennies. This new position was precarious, a 3-month trial period before they decided whether to keep me. One mistake, one missed deadline, one client complaint, and I'd be back to ramen noodles and overdue notices. My phone buzzed with an email from my supervisor. "Great work on the Morrison project. Looking forward to seeing what you can do next." The words should have filled me with relief, but they felt hollow in that dim room with its peeling walls and oppressive atmosphere. I'd spent 18 hours on those designs, hunched over my tablet until my spine felt like it might snap, surviving on coffee and determination. As I bent to plug in my laptop, something extraordinary happened. The persistent ache in my lower back, the one that had plagued me for months from hunching over drawing tablets, simply vanished. The relief was so sudden and complete that I froze, waiting for the familiar stab of pain to return. I straightened experimentally, twisted my spine, stretched my arms overhead. Nothing. For the first time in months, my back felt perfectly normal, as if years of poor posture had been magically erased. I finished unpacking as darkness settled over the city like a heavy blanket. Through the window, I watched the alley transform into a canyon of shadows, punctuated only by a single flickering streetlight that cast dancing shadows on the brick walls. The apartment felt smaller in the darkness, the shadows deeper and more substantial, as if they were entities unto themselves. At 11:30, as I was brushing my teeth with water that tasted faintly metallic, I heard it. A low hum emanated from somewhere within the walls themselves. It started as barely perceptible vibration, then grew stronger, a pulse that seemed to match my heartbeat with disturbing precision. The sound made my teeth ache and my skull throb as if something were trying to drill its way out from the inside. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to locate the source of the unsettling noise. The hum seemed to move, shifting from the kitchen to the living area like something alive crawling through the building's skeleton. It wasn't mechanical, not a pipe or a furnace or any sort of equipment I could identify. It was too deliberate, too rhythmic, almost like a voice chanting just below the threshold of human hearing. When I checked my apartment door one final time before bed, my blood turned to ice. It was open. Just a crack, maybe an inch, but I distinctly remembered locking it after the delivery. The deadbolt was still engaged, yet somehow the door had drifted ajar on its own. Cool air seeped through the gap, carrying that same sour smell from the hallway, more intense now, almost suffocating in its wrongness. I closed the door firmly, checking the lock twice, then wedging a chair under the handle for good measure. The hum faded gradually, leaving only the building's ordinary nighttime sounds. Pipes settling, floors creaking, the distant murmur of other lives behind thin walls. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that old buildings made noises and doors sometimes drifted if they weren't properly aligned. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay in my unfamiliar bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and wondered what I had gotten myself into. The rent was too cheap for a reason. The neighbors were wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. And somewhere in the building's depths, something had hummed with patient, predatory intent. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I would look for somewhere else, somewhere normal. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't. I couldn't afford to. This place might have been wrong in ways I didn't yet understand, but it was mine, and my back pain was gone for the first time in months. Something was watching from the darkness beyond my door, patient and eternal and utterly inhuman. I woke to silence. No alarm, no traffic, just the building's oppressive quiet pressing against my ears like cotton. Friday morning, and I didn't have to work. The long holiday weekend stretched ahead. 4 days of solitude in this place that already felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The air in 4B felt heavier today, thick with moisture that made my skin clammy. I shuffled to the bathroom, and the mirror stopped me cold. For just a second, less than a heartbeat, a shadow flickered behind my reflection. Not mine, something else, standing where nothing should be. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. When I looked back, the mirror showed only me, pale and wide-eyed. Just tired, I muttered, but my voice sounded hollow in the small space. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I leaned against the counter, trying to shake the unease that had settled in my bones. Above me, footsteps echoed across what should have been an empty floor. Slow, deliberate pacing back and forth, like someone wearing heavy boots. But I remembered the building manager mentioning that the 6th floor was vacant, had been for months. The footsteps stopped directly overhead, and I held my breath, waiting. Nothing. I flipped on the TV for background noise, but the screen filled with static. Not normal static. Shapes writhed in the gray-white snow, almost forming faces before dissolving back into chaos. I changed channels frantically, but every station showed the same twisted patterns. When I finally found a working channel, the morning news felt jarringly normal after the distorted shapes that seemed burned into my retinas. My phone buzzed with an email from a coworker. Saw your Morrison designs in the client presentation. They loved them. You're definitely making an impression. The praise should have felt good, but it sat wrong in my stomach, like candy that had turned sour. By noon, the walls felt like they were closing in. I needed to get out, do something normal. The building had a laundry room in the basement, and my clothes from yesterday reeked of that sour hallway smell. I gathered my dirty things and headed downstairs. The basement was a maze of concrete corridors lit by buzzing fluorescents. The laundry room sat at the far end, its door propped open. Inside, a man about my father's age fed quarters into a washing machine. He was thin, almost gaunt, with graying hair and eyes that looked like they hadn't seen restful sleep in years. "You're the new guy," he said, without looking up. 4B. Elliot. I started loading my clothes into an adjacent machine. "You are? Sam." He glanced at me and I saw a wariness in his expression, like he was sizing up a potential threat. "How's the apartment treating you?" Something in his tone made me pause. "Fine, I guess. It's quiet." Sam's laugh was bitter. "Quiet. Yeah, that's one word for it." He closed his washing machine with more force than necessary. "Word of advice, kid. Keep your head down. Don't ask questions. Just do what you're told." "What do you mean?" But Sam was already heading for the door. "You'll figure it out, or you won't." He stopped in the doorway, not turning around. "Either way, it's not my problem." His footsteps echoed down the corridor, leaving me alone with the mechanical hum of washing machines and a growing sense that I'd stepped into something far more complex than a cheap apartment. Back in 4B, I ordered Thai food for lunch. The delivery guy, different from yesterday's moving crew, arrived 20 minutes later, but when I opened the door, he froze, his eyes fixed on something behind me and his face drained of color. Just leave it on the floor," he stammered, setting the bag down and backing away. I turned to see Clara standing at the far end of the hallway, watching us with that same unnatural stillness. Her head tilted at that impossible angle, and her smile seemed wider today, stretching her pale face in ways that made my skin crawl. "Clara?" I called out, trying to sound neighborly. "How are you?" She didn't respond, just stared. The delivery guy was already at the stairs, taking them two at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Watch yourself." I brought the food inside and locked the door, turning the deadbolt twice. The Thai food tasted wrong, too salty and with an underlying metallic flavor that made me push it away half-eaten. The afternoon dragged. I tried to work on some freelance projects, but concentration was impossible. Every sound, the building settling, pipes groaning, the elevator's distant ding, set my nerves on edge. The air grew heavier as the day progressed, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I was looking for coffee filters in the kitchen cabinets when I found it. Taped to the inside of the cabinet above the sink, a piece of paper covered in cramped handwriting. My hands shook as I peeled away the yellowed tape. The rules. Follow them or die. Never make eye contact with the residents of the 5th floor for longer than 3 seconds. If they speak to you first, respond politely but briefly. Never initiate conversation. Leave a glass of water outside your door each night. Do not ask what drinks it. Do not invite them into your apartment under any circumstances. If you hear your name called through the walls, do not answer. Do not acknowledge you heard it. Never be in the hallway alone after midnight. Break these rules, and you won't leave 4B alive. They are not human. They are something else wearing human faces. The blessings they give come at a price, but the price of breaking their rules is death. My hands trembled as I read the note again. The paper felt brittle, like it might crumble at a touch. The ink was faded but legible, written in a hasty scrawl that spoke of desperation. At the bottom, in different ink, "Good luck. M." I thought of Clara's too wide smile, her unblinking stare, the way she moved without making sound. The delivery guy's terror, Sam's haunted eyes and cryptic warnings. It all clicked into place with a sickening certainty. Following the rules seemed insane, but ignoring them felt like suicide. I filled a glass with water and set it outside my door, feeling ridiculous, but too terrified to do otherwise. The hallway was empty, but I felt watched, nonetheless. That evening, there was a knock. I peered through the peephole and saw a pie sitting on the floor, no one in sight. It was homemade, with a lattice crust that might have been beautiful if not for the smell seeping around the edges, sweet rot, like fruit left too long in the sun. A note was tucked under the plate. "Welcome to the building. Clara." I didn't touch it. Something about the pie felt wrong, dangerous in a way I couldn't explain. I left it outside, hoping it would disappear on its own. The blessings continued, though. Another email from work, this time from my supervisor. The client specifically requested you for their next project. Excellent work. My bank account, when I checked it, showed an unexpected refund from my student loan servicer, a processing error that put an extra $300 in my account. But the apartment felt like it was shrinking around me. The air grew thicker as evening approached, heavy with the scent of mildew and something else, something organic and unpleasant. The walls seemed to pulse with the building's heartbeat, and shadows moved in my peripheral vision, always just out of direct sight. I tried to leave, to go for a walk, clear my head. But when I reached for the door handle, my hand froze. Terror flooded through me, primal and overwhelming. Every instinct screamed that leaving now, while Clara might be in the hallway, would be a mistake I wouldn't survive. The pie was gone when I checked again. Not taken, simply gone, without a trace it had ever been there. As darkness fell, the building came alive with sounds. Footsteps in the walls, whispers through the vents, the distant echo of doors opening and closing. I turned up the TV, but the noise seemed to seep through anyway, working its way into my skull like needles. At 11 p.m. I heard it, my name, whispered through the wall beside my bed. Elliot. The voice was Clara's, but distorted, stretched like audio played too slowly. Elliot, can you hear me? The rule said not to answer. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, fighting the compulsive urge to respond. The voice continued, cajoling, pleading, growing more insistent. I know you're there, Elliot. Just say hello, just one word. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voice seemed to come from inside my head now. My name echoed through the walls, through the floor, through the very air I breathed. It took every ounce of willpower not to scream back, to tell it to stop, to leave me alone. The whispers continued until dawn, and I didn't sleep at all. When morning light finally crept through my window, I checked the glass of water I'd left outside. It was empty, bone dry, and the air around where it had sat reeked of something rancid and ancient. I retreated into my apartment, locked the door, and realized with growing horror that I was trapped. The building had its hooks in me now. The blessings kept coming, but so did the watchers, and I was beginning to understand that leaving might not be an option anymore. Something had marked me as its own, and I didn't think it was planning to let me go. I woke to the sound of my keys hitting the kitchen floor. The metallic clatter cut through the morning silence like a gunshot, and my heart hammered against my ribs as I sat up in bed. I hadn't left them on the counter. I distinctly remembered hanging them on their hook before going to sleep, checking twice out of growing paranoia. But there they were, scattered across the linoleum, glinting in the pale morning light that filtered through my grimy window. I padded to the kitchen, my bare feet silent on the worn carpet, and froze when I opened the refrigerator to grab some juice. My keys sat nestled among the bottles, ice crystals forming around the metal like tiny fingers of frost. The fridge was clammy against my palm as I retrieved them, the keys so cold they burned my skin. I hadn't put them there. I would never put them there. Yet here they were, as if they'd been sitting in the freezer compartment for hours. A shadow moved in my peripheral vision, and I spun around, but the apartment was empty. Just the usual morning gloom, the peeling wallpaper, the water stains spreading across the ceiling like maps of imaginary continents. But the shadow had been there, tall, humanoid, standing just at the edge of my vision like a figure made of smoke. The hallway light outside my door wasn't just flickering anymore, it was humming. Not the usual electrical buzz, but something else. A low, melodic hum that rose and fell in patterns that sounded almost like speech, like someone singing my name in a voice too low to properly hear. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to make out the words, but the sound faded as soon as I focused on it. When I pulled away, it returned, that maddening almost melody that made my teeth ache and my skull throb. Sleep had been impossible the night before. Every time I'd started to drift off, whispers had seeped through the walls, soft, insistent voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize, punctuated by the occasional word in English. My name, mostly, but sometimes phrases that made no sense. Hungry, waiting, soon, now, soon. I'd followed the rules religiously. The glass of water I'd left outside my door was gone each morning, replaced by that rancid smell that made my stomach turn. I'd avoided eye contact with Clara, kept conversations brief and polite, never invited anyone inside, but the building's attention was on me now, and I could feel it pressing against my mind like a physical weight. I needed to talk to Sam. He was the only normal person in this place who seemed to understand what was happening, and yesterday's cryptic warnings weren't enough anymore. I needed answers. I found him in the laundry room again, feeding quarters into the same washing machine with the mechanical precision of someone who'd performed this ritual countless times. He looked worse than before. His skin had a grayish pallor, and dark circles ringed his eyes like bruises. "You look like hell," I said, trying to sound casual. Sam's laugh was bitter. "That's because I live in it." He glanced around the empty laundry room, then moved closer, lowering his voice. "You're having problems." It wasn't a question. "The rules aren't enough," I said. "They're getting stronger." "They always do." Sam's hands shook as he closed the washing machine lid. "You want to know what they are?" "Fine. They're not people, Elliot. They're something else, something that wears human faces like masks. They've been here longer than this building, longer than this city, maybe." He glanced at the ceiling, and I could see the tremor in his jaw. "They grant blessings to those who follow their rules. Wealth, health, love, success, whatever you need most. But they punish rule breakers. The last tenant in 4B broke one of the rules, spoke to Clara first, tried to be neighborly." "What happened to him?" "His apartment's been empty for 6 months." Sam's voice dropped to a whisper. "They don't just kill you, Elliot. They erase you, like you never existed at all." My blood turned to ice. "How many others?" "More than you'd think. The building's always full, but the faces change. People vanish, new ones move in, and the cycle starts again." He loaded his clothes with jerky, agitated movements. "The ones who survive learn to follow the rules. Keep your head down, don't ask questions, take the blessings and pay the price." "What price?" But Sam was already heading for the door. "You'll figure it out, or you won't be around to worry about it." Back in my apartment, I tried to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. My laptop screen showed the design project I'd been working on, a logo for a local restaurant, but the lines kept shifting when I wasn't looking directly at them, forming shapes that looked almost like faces. I ordered groceries online, desperate for some normal human contact. When the delivery guy arrived an hour later, I recognized him from the previous day, young, nervous, with darting eyes that kept checking the hallway behind me. "Just sign here," he said, thrusting the tablet at me. But as he spoke, his gaze fixed on something over my shoulder, and his face went white. Oh God. Oh Jesus Christ. I turned to see Clara standing at the far end of the hall. But something was wrong with her today. Her smile had split wider, stretching her face in ways that shouldn't have been possible, showing too many teeth that glinted like wet glass. Her hands twitched at her sides like a marionette with cut strings, jerky movements that made my skin crawl. "Don't look at her," the delivery guy whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't look directly at her." But it was too late. Clara's head tilted at that impossible angle, and for just a moment, our eyes met. 3 seconds, 4, 5. I couldn't look away, couldn't break the connection. Her gray eyes seemed to expand, becoming vast empty spaces that pulled at my consciousness like gravity wells. The delivery guy dropped the bags and ran, his footsteps echoing down the stairwell like gunshots. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "She's not human. Get out while you can." I dragged the groceries inside and locked the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. Clara had seen me looking. She knew I'd broken the rule, stared too long, let my fear override my caution. That's when I decided to search the apartment more thoroughly. If the previous tenant had left the rules, maybe he'd left other warnings, other clues about how to survive this place. I started with the kitchen, pulling out drawers, checking behind appliances, running my hands along the undersides of cabinets. I found it behind the refrigerator. The appliance was heavy, but desperation gave me strength, and I managed to pull it away from the wall with a grinding scrape of metal on linoleum. There, taped to the back in a plastic bag, was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. The handwriting was different from the rules, more frantic, scrawled in blue ink that had faded to a ghostly pale. My hands trembled as I unfolded it and read, "If you're reading this, then you found the rules and you're probably scared out of your mind. Good. Fear will keep you alive longer than courage will." I lived in 4B for 6 years. 6 years of following their rules, keeping my head down, accepting their gifts. They made me rich, promoted me 3 times in 2 years, set me up with the woman of my dreams, cleared my debts, fixed my health problems. The building gives you everything you've ever wanted, but I got careless, got comfortable. Started thinking of Clara as just a weird neighbor instead of what she really is. Spoke to her first one morning, just trying to be friendly. Said good morning before she could say it to me. She saw me, really saw me, and now they're done with me. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. while something scratches at my door. Been going on for 4 hours now. They know I'm leaving. They can smell it on me, the intention to run. But they're not going to stop me because they want me to run. They want me to tell people about this place, to spread the word. That's how they get new tenants. Don't slip like I did. Don't get comfortable. Don't ever think they're anything less than predators wearing human masks. And if you're smart, you'll leave before they sink their hooks too deep. The blessings are bait, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to walk away. Marcus P.S. Check your bank account. If it's empty, you've waited too long. My blood turned to ice as I read the last line. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and logged into my banking app. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching into eternity. 0 balance. Not just low, completely empty. Every penny I'd had, including the unexpected refund from yesterday, was gone. No transaction history, no explanation, just a flat 0 staring back at me like a death sentence. The building felt like it was closing in around me, the walls pressing closer with each breath. I was trapped. Financially, physically, spiritually trapped in this nightmare place with creatures that wore human faces and fed on human fear. That night, I paid for my rule violation. My apartment door rattled in its frame for hours, the sound punctuated by Clara's voice calling my name from the hallway. But her voice was wrong now, distorted, layered with harmonics that made my bones ache. Sometimes she sounded like herself, sometimes like an old woman, sometimes like a child. All of them calling for Elliot, all of them wanting me to open the door. I huddled in my bathroom with the rules clutched in my sweating hands, reading them over and over like a prayer. The scratching started around midnight, fingernails or claws dragging across my door in slow, deliberate patterns, spelling out words maybe, or drawing symbols I couldn't understand. An email arrived at 2 a.m. from my supervisor. Client rejected your latest designs. They're looking for a more experienced designer. We'll discuss your future with the firm on Monday. My back began to ache again, the familiar stabbing pain returning with interest. The blessing was fading, the protection lifting like fog in the morning sun. I'd looked too long, broken the rules, and now they were taking back their gifts. I packed a bag with shaking hands, throwing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag with desperate haste. I had to leave. Had to run like Marcus had run, before they decided to erase me entirely. But when I reached for my car keys, they weren't on their hook. They weren't in the kitchen. They weren't anywhere. As I searched frantically through my apartment, turning over cushions and checking every drawer, a new sound reached my ears. Laughter. Soft, melodic laughter coming from right outside my window. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. Clara's face pressed against the glass, her gray eyes now completely black, like staring into empty space. Her too wide smile filled the window, and her pale hands were spread against the glass like starfish. We were on the 5th floor. There was no fire escape, no ledge, no way for anyone to be outside that window. But there she was, floating in the empty air, her impossible smile stretching wider and wider until it threatened to split her face in half. She mouthed a single word through the glass: "Stay." I screamed and stumbled backward, crashing into my coffee table and sending my laptop flying. When I looked again, the window was empty, but her handprints remained on the glass, pale, ghostly impressions that slowly faded as I watched. The scratching at my door had stopped. The hallway was silent, but I could feel them out there, waiting in the darkness beyond my walls, patient as predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. I was trapped in apartment 4B with creatures that weren't human, and tomorrow I would have to decide whether to keep following their rules or join the list of tenants who had simply vanished without a trace. Either way, I was beginning to understand that leaving might not be an option anymore. The building had claimed me, and it wasn't planning to let me go. I woke at 2 a.m. to my name echoing through the walls with an intensity that made my bones ache. Elliot. The voice was Clara's, but distorted now, layered with harmonics that seemed to come from multiple throats at once. "Elliot, come out and play." The sound burrowed into my skull like needles, and before I could stop myself, before I could remember the rules clutched in my sweating hands, I screamed. "Stop!" The word tore from my throat, raw and desperate. Just stop! The moment the sound left my lips, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. The air in 4B turned glacial, so cold my breath misted in white clouds. A presence flooded my apartment, vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman. It pressed against my consciousness like a physical weight, and I felt something terrible turn its attention to me with the focus of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. Clara's voice came from right outside my door now, but it was wrong, stretched and distorted like a recording played at the wrong speed. "Oh, Elliot," she crooned, and her voice was sweet poison. "You spoke to us. You answered. Now we can come inside." The door handle rattled, turned, and I heard the deadbolt sliding back on its own. Panic flooded through me like ice water. I grabbed the rules and my phone and ran for the bathroom, slamming the door behind me and turning the flimsy lock with shaking fingers. I wedged myself into the corner between the toilet and the wall, clutching the brittle paper like a lifeline. The presence was in my apartment now. I could feel it moving through the rooms, searching, tasting the air. Footsteps that made no sound but somehow shook the building's foundations. The temperature plummeted until frost began forming on the bathroom mirror, my breath coming in sharp white puffs. "Where are you, Elliot?" Clara's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the walls themselves. "We just want to talk. We just want to play." I pressed my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, but her voice seemed to come from inside my head now. I read the rules over and over in the dim bathroom light, mouthing the words like a prayer. Never make eye contact for longer than 3 seconds. If they speak first, respond briefly. Leave water outside your door. Never invite them in. Don't answer when they call your name. Never be in the hallway after midnight. I'd broken the silence rule. I'd answered when she called my name, but I was still alive, still conscious, still me. Maybe there was hope. Maybe the other rules could still protect me. The presence circled my apartment like a shark, and I could hear things being moved, displaced. My laptop crashed to the floor. Books tumbled from shelves. The refrigerator door opened and closed with deliberate rhythm, each bang making me flinch. Come out, Clara sang. "We know you're hiding. We can smell your fear, Elliot. It's delicious." Hours passed. The cold seeped through my clothes, into my bones, until I was shivering so violently my teeth chattered. But gradually, as dawn approached, the presence began to fade. The temperature rose degree by degree. The footsteps grew fainter, more distant. By the time pale morning light crept through the bathroom's tiny window, the apartment had fallen silent. I waited another hour before I dared to open the door. My living space was destroyed. Furniture overturned, books scattered across the floor, my laptop screen cracked. But I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was still alive. I packed with desperate efficiency, throwing clothes and essentials into my duffel bag. My hands shook as I folded shirts and gathered toiletries. I had to leave. I couldn't survive another night like that. Whatever job opportunities I might lose, whatever financial ruin awaited me, nothing was worth staying in this nightmare place. But as I reached for my phone to call a cab, an email notification chimed. Almost against my will, I checked it. The subject line made my heart stop. Urgent, lead designer position, Morrison and Associates project. My supervisor's message was brief but life-changing. Elliot, fantastic news. Morrison and Associates was so impressed with your preliminary designs that they've requested you as lead designer for their complete corporate rebrand. This is a 6-figure project with potential for ongoing work. The client specifically asked for you, contract details attached. This could be the beginning of a very promising career. Congratulations. I stared at the screen, my packed bag forgotten at my feet. 6 figures, lead designer, corporate rebrand, the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime, if it came at all, the kind of project that could wipe out my student debt entirely and set me up for the career I'd always dreamed of. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your success. Some rewards are worth the price. A friend. I knew with absolute certainty that this opportunity was connected to the building, to the things that lived here. They were offering me a choice, flee and lose everything or stay and accept their bargain. A knock at my door made me jump. I peered through the peephole and saw Sam standing in the hallway, looking tired but oddly pleased. "You made it," he said when I opened the door. His voice held a mixture of relief and approval. "I heard the commotion last night, thought you might be gone by morning." "I almost was." I gestured to my packed bag. Sam nodded, glancing at my phone where the email was still open. "Job opportunity? How did you—" "They always offer something when you survive your first real test." He stepped into my apartment, surveying the damage with the eye of someone who'd seen it before. "You broke a rule last night, answered when they called. But you survived because you didn't invite them in, didn't open the door. The bathroom probably saved you. Running water, enclosed space. They don't like confined areas." "This is insane," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Sam picked up one of my scattered books and placed it on the table. "You just got offered a career-making project. Your back pain's gone, isn't it? When's the last time you worried about money?" He was right. I touched my lower back experimentally. No pain, no stiffness, and the email in my phone represented more money than I'd ever dreamed of making. "Now you know how to live here," Sam continued. "Follow the rules religiously. Never get comfortable, never let your guard down. Take the blessings they offer and pay the price they demand. It's not a life everyone can handle, but for those who can." He shrugged. "The rewards are substantial." Over the following weeks, I learned the rhythm of veteran life in the building. Every night, I set out a glass of water. Every morning it was empty, and the air around my door reeked of something ancient and wrong. I kept my eyes down when I passed Clara in the hallway, never looking directly at her, never speaking first. When she smiled her too wide smile and tilted her head at that impossible angle, I nodded politely and kept walking. The scratches appeared on my walls every few days, thin, deliberate marks that looked almost like tally marks, keeping score of something I didn't want to understand. I painted over them, but they always returned. The blessings continued to flow. The Morrison project was a massive success, leading to 3 more high-profile clients. My student loans disappeared, not paid off, but erased entirely, as if they'd never existed. A promotion came through at the firm, along with a salary that made my friends from college openly envious. But the watchers never left. I felt them in the walls, in the shadows, in the spaces between heartbeats. Clara's presence grew heavier each day, her smile wider, her stare more penetrating. The other residents of the 5th floor, pale figures I glimpsed in peripheral vision, multiplied. Sometimes I counted 6 or 7 of them in the hallway, all standing perfectly still, all watching my door. I developed routines that kept me safe. Lock the door twice every time I entered. Check the locks before bed. never be in the hallway after 11 p.m., giving myself a full hour buffer before midnight, speak only when spoken to, and then only in brief, polite phrases, keep my eyes down, my head down, my voice down. The building had accepted me as one of its own, but the acceptance came with a price. I was watched, always watched. Every decision I made was scrutinized by things that wore human faces, but harbored alien intelligence behind their too perfect smiles. Some nights, I lay in bed and thought about leaving, but where would I go? My career was here now, built on foundations I didn't dare question. My success was real, tangible, but it was also leashed to this place, to these rules, to these watchers. I was safe, prosperous, successful. I was also trapped. 3 months after that first terrible night, I stood at my window looking down at the alley where I'd once parked my car as a nervous newcomer. A young woman was moving boxes into the building, probably another desperate graduate student lured by the impossibly cheap rent. I watched her struggle with a heavy box and felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy or might have been envy. She still had a choice. She could still run. Clara appeared in the hallway behind her, smiling that stretching smile, and I saw the newcomer's face change as some primal instinct recognized danger. But Clara's voice was melodic and welcoming as she offered help with the boxes, and I knew the cycle was beginning again. I closed my curtains and returned to my computer, where 3 new design projects waited for my attention. High-paying projects from clients who specifically requested me, projects that would keep me comfortable and successful and bound to this place forever. The scratches on my wall had multiplied overnight, covering an entire section near my bed. In the morning light, they almost looked like words, like a message carved by patient, inhuman hands. I would paint over them again, and they would return again, because that was the price of the blessings I'd accepted. Outside my door, I heard the soft sound of Clara's footsteps and the whisper of her voice calling a new name. The building was feeding again, growing stronger, adding another tenant to its collection of the blessed and the damned. I opened my laptop and began to work. The Morrison & Associates logo stared back at me from the screen, sleek and professional and built on foundations I tried not to think about. But it was mine, earned through talent and terror in equal measure. This was my life now, safe behind rules written in desperation by someone who'd fled into the night, prosperous beyond my wildest dreams and watched by things that weren't human, successful and trapped and resigned to a future measured in glasses of water left outside doors and scratches that appeared on walls like cancer. It was enough. It had to be enough. Because leaving was no longer an option, and staying meant accepting that some prisons came with golden bars. The building had claimed me, and I had chosen to let it.